let's move on. Let's keep the discussion flowing remarkably. I like to use that word at this particular point of the episode. Fans Pulse Lap 3 is upon us. You have voted, we have listened. Let's round off then episode 15 with the final discussion topic. All of us have seen them. There are big ones, there are small ones, there can be tiny ones. Some are wide and roomy, others are narrow and tight. Stay on thread. Of course, on this show, we're most obviously talking about speedway tracks. We're going to have a discussion about the optimal speedway track, technical versus open throttle tracks. Which ones do we supporters have as a preference, and which ones are likely, in the general supporters' view, to be the ones that generate the most entertaining speedway? Because ultimately that's what we want, and that's what we need to bring in new viewers, new bums on seats. So Carol Johnson, I'm going to start with you on this one. This topic could alternatively have been labelled as what makes for the best speedway entertainment, but fair to say that both types of tracks, if I can categorise them like that, have their merits. But Carol, which one do you favour and why? If that's not too wide a question.
Yeah, like you said, I think you can have a small track that's good racing. I did mention even I think 2 weeks ago about Plymouth. My first visit there, and it's a tiny little place, but the racing was fantastic. So you got a tiny little track like that, the smallest track in the country, and then I always go back to Peterborough being one of probably the best, obviously before the National Speedway Stadium was built, which is a superb track. I thought Peterborough was probably the best track in the UK for racing. So much passing, so many different lines, and so fair to everyone, which makes for a good track. But I think for me, I like to see the fast tracks. That's something that I do like. I like to see riders flat out, full gas, but I like to see a track where there's plenty of lines. I don't like these. I look at everybody raves about Poland. Polish tracks are so slick, and there's just, you see the odd good pass, if they're on the fence. But I think you look at the likes of Sheffield, the likes of Bellevue now, to Glasgow to a degree, it's the passing, the racing is so good, and that draws crowds in. And I think because there's so many lines, because the tracks are prepared like they are, you go to Ipswich and it's a very one-liney sort of track, almost a gate and go, has been for years, but you get that. You want that variety. You ask a rider what they prefer, and you could turn around and go, Scott Nichols prefers a tight and technical track, doesn't like a fast track. Whereas you could talk to Ulrich, who would go, I prefer a fast track. I don't like the technical ones, even though he is good on both. But you've got that rider that prefers a big track, a rider prefers a smaller track. Me, it's all about the entertainment. If you've got a track that's good for racing on and produces good racing, then that's a winner for me in Speedway. I don't care who's racing on it, as long as the racing's good. And that's what we need. Size of track doesn't matter as long as the racing is good.
I like it, Carol. Nigel Crabtree, I'm going to bring you on this one. So Nigel, picture the scene, right? You've won the lottery, you've won big, Nigel, and money's no object to you, right? You buy a bit of land, which has cost you next to nothing. Space isn't an issue, and you decide that you want to build a new speedway track, Nigel. What's Nigel Crabtree's formula for building that track? Is it going to be a small, tight, technical track? Is it going to be a big, fast-paced, multi-line circuit? What would you do, Nigel?
As cheap as possible.
I do believe you can't have a technical track now with lay-down engines. I was talking to Graham Mills only a few weeks ago. He used to do Peter Carlson's engines as Stuart Milner. And Graham tells me this is an engine tuner telling me there's only one way to ride these modern laydown, and that's on the stop. So your tight technical tracks, they're out, aren't they? They're out. I mean, both yourself and Carl said about Ipswich, there's no racing on it, it's one line track. Yeah, I don't think it's Ipswich, it's a one line track at all, because it never used to be. It is now, because the engines don't suit a track like Ipswich, whereas you get the Bellevue, Peterborough, which I don't agree with Carl neither about being one of the best tracks in the country, but that only because it was too big and fast for me. But, you know, them are the tracks for the laydown, the Peterborough, the Bellevue, the Workington. Scunthorpe, it's only small, but it rides very big. Redcar, another one, the race track, also nice and wide. You know, with Bellevue, everybody goes on about Bellevue, but that's a big, wide race track, isn't it, where everybody can ride inside or outside, but flat out, never get off the gas. You can't go to Ipswich, I'm sure, and ride flat out for that, inside or outside, because you'll just, well, you wipe the fence out, I'm sure. It's not so much Ipswich's fault. The engines have changed and the tracks haven't moved forward with the engines. The better racetracks, I think, at the minute, are your new ones that's been built and seem to suit these laydowns, don't they? Like your Polish tracks, as Carl says. The Polish tracks are slick, but let's go again. You don't need a lot of dirt on to make good racing if the tracks are right. As Bellevue doesn't have heaps and heaps of dirt on. I don't know, Sheffield's another one, isn't it? Sheffield, like Peterborough, though, I think it's a bit narrow for these engines, and everybody gets right up to the fence, don't they? Mm-hmm. I don't know what Peterborough was like in recent times, or just before the show. I haven't been for a lot of years, but, you know, the engines have changed, the tracks maybe haven't. Some tracks. And let's not forget, there isn't the E-spawns and the lights. They were the technical tracks. And going back, I don't think there was any better race track than Shortfield at Glasgow. Once you took the corners in and made the corners in a point, there were so many racing lines there. And terrific entertainment there every week.
Why didn't you use them, Nigel?
I knew the one I knew.
I know you did, because you could pick your own line, Nigel. You were out in front. That's why.
I always thought, Derek, what's the point of being 2 foot off fence when there's another 35 foot on inside of you? That fence is going to hurt when you clout it. So keep on inside. Give yourself a bit of room, safety, self-preservation.
I like it. Stuart McDonald, let's bring you on this one. So, Stuart, I totally get that throttle control is a necessary, vital part of a speedway rider's toolkit, right? And it shouldn't all be about just twist and go type speedway. In your career, Stuart McDonald, you spent quite a number of seasons on what I would describe as smaller technical tracks, and you might be the best qualified person on this call to comment on the virtues of that style of track, Stuart.
Well, when I started, my first race, Derek, was Linlithgow racetrack. So for obviously a lot of the guys that started there became internationalists for Scotland, but it was a small technical track and it was always really grippy. And then when I was 16, I signed for Edinburgh, which was Powder Hall at the time, and I love Powder Hall. It wasn't the smallest, but it was quite technical. And then obviously from there, you know, Armadale, Wolverhampton. I used to love racing at Newcastle. Newcastle was a track that I would never look at and go, wow, I want to race that. But I always did well down there. And I think with the smaller, more technical tracks, Derek, I seem to love them. I really did. You know, Armadale was always really grippy. Wolverhampton, again, you know, the second bend, coming out the second bend at Wolverhampton was the Peter Carlson line. And it was so technical. If you got that right at Wolverhampton, you were unstoppable. And then, you know, the bigger tracks, I'll be honest, I absolutely hated them. I did. You know, I'll go back as far as, I mean, I know that not many riders enjoyed going to the Exeter track. But when we used to go to Exeter, I took one look at it and I left everything in the pits. You know, it was just, I just wasn't interested. And another one that I didn't enjoy riding as well was Sheffield. You know, I mean, Carl was mentioning about Peterborough. I loved racing Peterborough, but I absolutely hated riding Sheffield. I don't know why. I couldn't get to grips with it. And I think that was probably the upbringing of Linlithgow, Powderhall, Armadale. I mean, Berrington Lough, you know, the old Berwick track. I absolutely loved that place. I loved it. Small, tight track, and it was a great track to race. You know, for anybody that ever raced it at the old Lough track, to say they didn't enjoy it, they'd be lying. It was a fun track, and it was small, technical, and you just had to fling the bike in early. And like Nigel says, the throttle control was a major part of it. It really was. I remember watching a meeting at Armadale. I think it was Joe Screen had come up. It was his first match, I think, for Glasgow. And it was the first time I'd seen a rider go around Armadale flat out without taking the throttle off. And I've never seen anybody ride Armadale like Joe Screen. For a big guy, for a small technical track, I mean, it was 10, 15 bike lengths ahead after 2 laps. And I was just a big fan of the technical tracks, Derek. I loved it. And for a tall rider as well, being 6 foot, people would have thought that it was more of a bigger track. But if you'd have said to me, would you rather race in Sheffield or Armadale, I'd pick Armadale. And even back before they shut, Arena Essex, you know, the first time I went to Arena Essex, there was no fence. Nigel will remember that. Carl, you'll remember it. There was no fence. And that was really technical because you didn't know where your guidance was. So you couldn't see. You had to tow harder. And it was really daunting. But again, Rye House was another one. I loved Rye House. Absolutely loved Rye House. Didn't score many points, but I enjoyed riding it. And let's say if you to say to me, apart from, you know, Nigel building a cheap track, I would build a smaller track all day long. I loved them. Technical, loads of dirt, you know, Jimmy Beaton style. Let's get the dirt right in the first bend. You know, I don't know if you've seen Kings Lynn the other night. The track, the start was on, but no, Kings Lynn, sorry, Leicester. The start, did you see them? And
yes, I did. Yes,
oh my God, that was like Jimmy Beaton back in the Glasgow days.
That's
you know,
right.
it was like Gate 1, Gate 3, Nigel's there with Stoke. There's him and Monaghan off Gate 2 and 4, but 1 and 3 were like that, you know. And the deeper the track was, I loved it. It was more challenging to me than having a Sheffield or even Swindon. You know, that was another fast track as well. Mm-hmm. They didn't do anything for me. So
Stuart, one supplementary question, if you don't mind, and I'm asking you because you've got most experience of spending seasons on some of the smaller tracks. So be it Armadale or Rover or Monmore or Lakeside, whatever it might be. You know, I've got this theory, right, that, you know, we all want to see passing at Speedway. That's the key thing that we want to be able to see. But on those smaller, more technical tracks, I'm less sure that they lend themselves to riders being able to pull off wonderful passes, as opposed to forcing riders into making mistakes and taking advantage of mistakes. Am I being unfair to those circuits?
I think, yeah. I think when you look at some of the smaller circuits, Derek, you know, some of the guys that would come up from Eastbourne, Rye House, or in Essex, these guys were always on the ball with their starts. And coming to Glasgow or Edinburgh, Armadale, these guys would make the starts, but they would have no idea how to race the track, because they've came a Swindon rider or a Exeter rider, a Sheffield rider, a Hull rider, like Nigel. You know, these small technical tracks are so difficult to ride. And I think there is a bit of entertainment as opposed to your Bellevue with the racing's 4 lines, things like that. But watching the smaller technical track racers, I think it's a little bit more fun. Plus, fans like to see controversy, accidents, crashes. We don't like to have crashes, but the smaller tracks have more crashes. You know, there's a little bit more entertainment from a fan point of view, not from a rider point of view.
Yeah.
But I think some of the racing that Armadale produces is phenomenal, because the home riders, you want the home riders to miss the start. Like Nigel said last week to Chris Morton, Chris missed the start every match at Bellevue, but would be at the front after the second lap, and that's what you always wanted. You know, you wanted Les Collins to miss the start well, he missed the starts anyway with his Jawas, but you would look at Les and go, he's last out at the start, but he would gradually build up in these little tracks, and big fan of them, massive fan of them.
Thank you, Stuart. Nigel, I'll bring you back in again. Nigel, if we asked 100 Speedway fans to share their favourite type of track, given the categories that we've spoken about, is the answer always likely to be what you were brought up watching? You know, if you were brought up watching Speedway at Wolverhampton or Eastbourne, you're going to favour a smaller, more technical track. If you're brought up in Peterborough or somewhere like that, you would favour a bigger track. Is that bias likely to exist, Nigel?
I would have thought so, wouldn't you? You know, let's not forget, there's nowhere near as many technical tracks about nowadays as there used to be. And I think everybody's brought up on whatever they brought up, aren't they? Your people, it's gone to arena racing, very technical track, and I don't know if it was a very good track for the laydowns, but, you know, people say that was okay, won't they? Because they used to go there every week. But without doubt, I mean, the Speedway Stadium probably produces as good a race as there is anywhere in the country, the world, you know, so it shows what type of track is needed nowadays, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And Andy Meredith, who you had on a few weeks ago, didn't you? You know, does an excellent job of it, great surface, and produces great racing. So we can only go with what we're with at the minute, and that seems to be the type of tracks. You know, Scunthorpe's another one. You know, produces terrific racing, I believe, week in and week out, as Glasgow does. But Glasgow is a very racing track, isn't it?
Yes.
And what's Edinburgh like nowadays? I've not been to Edinburgh for years.
It's on the smaller side, the smaller, more technical side. Yeah.
There can be a small track there, but just because they're small,
yes,
they do ride. Mildenhall is a prime example.
Yeah.
You know, that was only small, but it rode like a big track.
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah.
Scunthorpe's not big, but very sort of roundish, a bit like Sheffield, you know, and produces good racing. But then the type of tracks today's engines need to be on, I think. They're no good on the technical tracks. You know, Speedway's outgrown them.
Thank you, Nigel. CJ, I'm going to leave the last word to you this week. You know, you mentioned Poland earlier on. So Poland, Czech Republic, Sweden, they don't do technical tracks. Does that, or should that, tell us something, Carol?
Yeah, they can't ride the small technical track.
That's what it tells us.
That's why they don't have them. But look, we've always said the UK is the place for the top riders to learn their trade. To be on them technical tracks gives you that bike control, and I think it makes for better riders. Look at riders that are in the Grand Prix or have been in the Grand Prix for the last 4, 5, 6 years. Majority of the top boys have been racing in the UK, you know, and you get a couple that don't, you know, the Smarslicks, he's been here, but he had, you know, a couple of meetings, binned it off because he couldn't get round them, you know. Now does that make for the best rider in the world? If you was to put, you know, the Grand Prix on some of these tighter technical tracks, as we've seen in the past, these Polish boys struggle, you know. So, you know, I think as a rider, you have to ride every track now. And I do think the smaller tracks, being more technical, do produce better riders, you know, for sure. Certainly, you know, you look at Scotty Nichols, brilliant on the technical stuff. If the British Championship wasn't at Bellevue and was at Wolverhampton before it closed, or at, you know, or at Edinburgh, he would have been a 10-time British champion, you know. And I've said that to him. But look, the tracks are what they are, and like Nige says, they nowadays the smaller tracks don't really suit these engines, don't really suit. Certainly a smaller track with a lot of dirt on it, it certainly doesn't suit these engines. You know, and I look at where we're at now at Peterborough. Obviously, I don't know if anybody's seen the pictures of the state of the stadium as it is now. You know, and there might be hope of us going back there. with things that are going on at the minute. And if there was that, then I would probably look at saying, right, let's alter the track slightly. Let's widen it a little bit more if we can. It is narrow on the straights. We have opened it up on the corners, but can we open it up another 1.5 meters, 2 meters to make for better racing again? That's something that we'd look at. I always looked, and Stuart and Nigel probably will know this more, the original Mildenhall track, before they put the dog track around it, I thought was an absolutely fantastic racetrack. It was banked. It was quite wide in the corners. I thought it produced excellent racing. And then they went and put this stupid dog track around it and made it a tight little technical thing that, everybody sort of struggled. And I used to love going to Mildenhall. I was on the junior track at Mildenhall when I was growing up, and we used to watch the racing there, and I thought it was fantastic. And it's a shame that went the way it did, but obviously they thought the dogs was the way to go. But I thought they ruined the track by doing what they've done to it. And Nigel he's probably rode there many times at the original Mildenhall track. He's probably had many fish and chips at the Mildenhall track, which was always good.
Not as good as Right House, though.
No, not as good as Right House chips, yeah.
But you're right what you're saying, Carl. Mildenhall, when they first built that, it was a lovely little racetrack. It didn't ride small, did it? It rode like, even though it was small, it rode like a big racetrack, even in that day.
Yeah, and I think the banking, same in Glasgow, the banking helps it ride like a big track.
Yes.
Because the banking holds the speed in the bike, so you can use the banking for the pace. So it does naturally gift itself to a faster track.
Fantastic.
And it's great racing at Glasgow, isn't it? I've seen some videos of Glasgow, some terrific racing up there. Not a big track.
It's not a big track. No, it's not. It's not a particularly big track.
Like a big track, though, because as Carl says, the bank, the width of it, terrific place, and I think we've done a great job up in Glasgow, as I've said many times.
No disagreement from me on that one. Listen, Nigel, Carol, Stuart, thank you very much. That's a checkered flag on episode 15, 360 Speedsters. I hope you've enjoyed. It's been a little bit difficult behind the scenes this week. Special thanks to Nigel for soldiering on, because Nigel's not been able to quite see and hear everything that the rest of us have been able to this week. So Nigel, thanks for hanging in there and being so professional. Carol and Stuart, thanks again for your input and support. And there we are at the end of episode 15. Please remember to give us a follow, etc., to comment on some of the discussions that you've heard this week. Remember, there is now quick mental arithmetic, 60 long form episodes of individual discussions on our YouTube channel. So there's hours and hours and hours of Speedway chats on YouTube. If you haven't been with us on the 360 journey from the start 15 weeks ago, please do pay attention. Search us out on YouTube, 360 Speedway, and you'll find a whole library of Speedway discussions that will hopefully thrill you and entertain you. Listen, have a good week. Look after yourselves. Enjoy your Speedway. Get yourselves trackside. And we look forward to your company again next week. Thank you very much.
See you.
Good night all.
Okay.